Hi, everybody. It's Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? Carlos Castaneda, the active side of infinity. Before I begin, as always, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I love when people help. And if you can't help, support my cause in helping me eat and pay some bills, you can like. I also was fiddling around with YouTube earlier, and if you go onto the playlist tabs, I made it easier to find the videos. So like Dolores Cannon, The Law of One, The Keys of Enoch, Awaspe, Urantia, Carlos Castaneda, Barbara Messiniak, The Wanderer's Handbook, the Enuma Elish, the Emerald Tablets. I put everything in like a subsection, so you don't have to go through like the oracle readings and all that stuff to find them. So I made that a little easier. I noticed that just makes life easier for people if you are privy on one topic than the other, which is fine. It's easier for you to find. So check that out. Earlier I did Awaspe. I finished off that lovely chapter. Now it's Carlos Castaneda time. Because who can't get enough of Carlos Castaneda? Beyond Syntax. The Usher. I was in Don Juan's house in Sonora, sound asleep in my bed. When he woke me up, I had stayed up practically all night, mulling over concepts that he had explained to me. You have rested enough, he said firmly, almost gruffly, as he shook me by the shoulders. Don't indulge in being fatigued. Your fatigue is more than fatigue, a desire not to be bothered. Something in you resents being bothered, but it's most important that you exacerbate that part of you until it breaks down. Let's go for a hike. Don Juan was right. There was some part of me that resented immensely being bothered. I wanted to sleep for days and not think about Don Juan's sorcery concepts anymore. Thoroughly against my will, I got up and followed him. Don Juan had prepared a meal, which I devoured as if I hadn't eaten for days. And then we walked out of the house and headed east toward the mountains. I had been so dazed that I hadn't noticed that it was early morning until I saw the sun, which is right above the eastern range of mountains. I wanted to comment to Don Juan that I had slept all night without moving, but he hushed me. He said we were going to go on an expedition to the mountains to search for specific plants. What are you going to do with the plants? Are you going to collect, Don Juan? I asked him as soon as we had started off. They're not for me, he said with a grin. They are for a friend of mine, a botanist and a pharmacist. He makes potions with them. Is he a Yaqui, Don Juan? Does he live here in Sonora? I asked. No, he isn't a Yaqui, and he doesn't live here in Sonora. You'll meet him someday. Is he a sorcerer, Don Juan? Yes, he is, he replied dryly. I asked him then if I could take some of the plants to be identified at the botanical garden at UCLA. Surely, surely, he said. I had found out in the past that whenever he said surely, he didn't mean it. It was obvious that he had no intention whatsoever of giving me any specimens for identification. I became very curious about his sorcerer friend and asked him to tell me more about him. Perhaps describe him, telling me where he lived and how he got to meet him. Whoa, 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 Don Juan said, as if I were a horse. Hold it, hold it. Who are you, Professor Loca? Do you want to study his cognitive system? We went deep into the arid foothills. Don Juan walked steadily for hours. I thought that the task of the day was going to be just a walk. He finally stopped and sat down on the shaded side of the foothills. It is time that you start on one of the biggest projects of your sorcery, Don Juan said. What is this project of sorcery that you're talking about, Don Juan? I inquired. It's called the recapitulation. Recapitulation, I got it. The old sorcerers used to call it recounting the events of your life. And for them, it started as a simple technique, a device to aid them in remembering what they were doing and saying in their disciplines. For their disciplines, the technique had the same value. It allowed them to remember what their teachers had said and done to them. It took terrible social upheavals, like being conquered and vanquished several times before the old sorcerers realized that their technique had far-reaching effects. Are you referring, Don Juan, to the Spanish conquest? I asked. No, he said. That was just the icing on the cake. There were other upheavals before that, more devastating. When the Spaniards got here, the old sorcerers didn't exist anymore. The disciples of those who had survived other upheavals were very cagey by then. They knew how to take care of themselves. It is the new crop of sorcerers who renamed the old sorcerers' technique recapitulation. There's an enormous premium on time, he continued. For sorcerers in general, time is of the essence. The challenge I am faced with is that in every compact unit of time, I must cram into you everything there is to know about sorcery as an abstract proposition, but in order to do that, I have to build the necessary space in you. What space? What are you talking about, Don Juan? The premise of sorcerers is that in order to bring something in, there must be a space to put it in, he said. If you are filled to the brim with the items of everyday life, there's no space for anything new. That space must be built. Do you see what I mean? The sorcerers of old times believed that the recapitulation of your life made that space. It does, and much more, of course. The way sorcerers perform the recapitulation is very formal, he went on. It consists of writing a list of all the people they had met from the present to the very beginning of their lives. Once they had that list, they take the first person on it and recollect everything they can about that person. And I mean everything, every detail. It's better to recapitulate from the present to the past because the memories of the present are fresh. And in this manner, the recollection ability is honored and honed. What practitioners do is to recollect and breathe. They inhale slowly and deliberately, fanning the head from right to left, in a barely noticeable swing, and exhale in the same fashion. He said that the inhalations and exhalations should be natural. If they were too rapid, one would enter into something that he called tiring breaths, breaths that require slower breathing afterward in order to calm down the muscles. And what do you want me to do, Don Juan, with all of this? I asked. You begin making your list today, he said. Divide it by years, by occupations. Arrange it in any order you want. But to make it sequential, with the most recent person first, and end with mommy and daddy. And then remember everything about them. No more ado than that. As you practice, you will realize what you are doing. On my next visit to his house, I told Don Juan that I had been meticulously going through the events of my life, and that it was very difficult for me to adhere to his strict format and follow my list of persons one by one. Ordinarily, my recapitulation took me every which way. I let the events decide the direction of my recollection. What I did, which was volation, was to adhere to a general unit of time. For instance, I had begun with the people in the anthropology department, but I let my recollection pull me to anywhere in time from the present to the day I started attending school at UCLA. I told Don Juan that an odd thing I found out, which I had completely forgotten, was that I had no idea that UCLA existed until one night when my girlfriend's roommate from college came to Los Angeles and we picked her up at the airport. She was going to study musicology at UCLA. Her plane arrived in the early evening and she asked me if I could take her to the campus so she could take a look at the place where she was going to spend the next 4 years of her life. I knew where the campus was, for I had driven past its entrance on Sunset Boulevard endless times on my way to the beach. I had never been on the campus, though. It was during the semester break, the few people that we found directed us to the music department. The campus was deserted, but what I witnessed subjectively was the most exquisite thing I've ever seen. It was a delight to my eyes. The buildings seemed to be alive with some energy of their own. What was going to be a very cursory visit to the music department turned out to be a gigantic tour of an entire campus. I fell in love with UCLA. I mentioned to Don Juan that the only thing that marred my ecstasy was my girlfriend's annoyance at my insistence on walking through the huge campus. What the hell could there be in here? She yelled at me in protest. It's as if you have never seen a university campus in your life. You've seen one, you've seen them all. I think you're just trying to impress my friend with your sensitivity. I wasn't. I was vehemently told them that I was genuinely impressed by the beauty of my surroundings. I sensed so much hope in those buildings, so much promise, and yet I couldn't express my subjective state. I've been in school nearly all my life, my girlfriend said through clenched teeth, and I'm sick and tired of it. No one's going to find shit in here. All you find is guff, and they don't even prepare you to meet your responsibilities in life. When I mentioned that I would like to attend school here, she became even more furious. Get a job, she screamed. Go and meet your life from 8 to 5 and cut the crap. That's what life is, a job from 8 to 5, 40 hours a week. See what it does to you? Look at me. I'm super educated now and I am not fit for a job. All I knew was that I had never seen a place so beautiful. I made a promise that I would go to school at UCLA, no matter what, come hell or high water. My desire had everything to do with me, and yet it was not driven by the need for immediate gratification. It was more in the realm of awe. Sorry about this. Did you say hi to everybody? Did you hear her? What? She ain't leaving. She likes the book though. I told Don Juan that my girlfriend's annoyance had been so jarring to me that it forced me to look at her in a different light, and that to my recollection, that was the first time ever that a commentary had aroused such a deep reaction in me. I saw facets of a character in my girlfriend that I hadn't seen before, facets that scared me stiff. I think I judged her terribly, I said to Don Juan. After our first visit to the campus, we drifted apart. It was as if UCLA had come between us like a wedge. I know that it's stupid to think this way. It isn't stupid, Don Juan said. It was a perfectly valid reason and reaction. While you were walking on the campus, I saw that you had a bout with intent. You intended being there, and anything that was opposed to it, you had to let go. But don't overdo it, he went on. The touch of warrior travelers is very light, although it is cumulative. The hand of a warrior traveler begins as a heavy gripping iron hand, but becomes like the hand of a ghost, a hand made of gossamer. Warrior travelers leave no marks, no tracks. That's the challenge for warrior travelers. Don Juan's comments made me sink into a deep, morose state of recriminations against myself, for I knew from the little bit of my recounting that I was extremely heavy-handed, obsessive, and domineering. I told Don Juan about my renunciations. The power of recapitulation, Don Juan said, is that it stirs up all the garbage of our lives and brings it to the surface. Then Don Juan delineated the intricacies of awareness and perception, which were the bias of the recapitulation. He began by saying that he was going to present an arrangement of concepts that I should not take as sorcerer's theories under any conditions, because it was an arrangement formulated by the shamans of ancient Mexico as a result of seeing energy directed as it flows in the universe. He warned me that he would present the units of this arrangement to me without any attempt at classifying them or ranking them by any predetermined standard. I'm not interested in classifications, he went on. You have been classifying everything all your life. Now you are going to be forced to stay away from classifications. The other day when I asked you if you knew anything about clouds, you gave me the names of all the clouds and the percentage of moisture that one should expect from each one of them. You were a veritable weatherman. But when I asked you if you knew what you could do with the clouds personally, you had no idea what I was talking about. Classifications have a world of their own, he continued. After you begin to classify anything, the classification becomes alive and it rules you. But since classifications never started as energy-giving affairs, they always remain like dead logs. They are not trees, they are merely logs. He explained that the sorcerers of ancient Mexico saw that the universe at large is composed of energy fields in the form of luminous filaments. They saw zillions of them whenever they turned to see. They also saw that those energy fields arranged themselves into currents of luminous fibers, streams that are constant perennial forces in the universe, and that the current or stream of filaments that is related to the recapitulation was named by those sorcerers the dark sea of awareness and also the eagle. He stated that those sorcerers also found out that every creature in the universe is attached to the dark sea of awareness at a round point of luminosity that was apparent when those creatures were perceived as energy. On the point of luminosity, which the sorcerer of ancient Mexico called the assemblage point, Don Juan said the perception was assembled by a mysterious aspect of the dark sea of awareness. Don Juan asserted that on the assemblage point of human beings, zillions of energy fields from the universe at large, in the form of luminous filaments, converged and go through it. These energy fields are converted into sensory data, and the sensory data is then interpreted and perceived as the world we know. Don Juan further explained that what turns the luminous fibers into sensory data is the dark sea of awareness. Sorcerers see this transformation and call it the glow of awareness, a sheen that extends like a halo around an assemblage point. He warned me that he was going to make a statement which, in the understanding of sorcerers, was central to comprehending the scope of the recapitulation. Putting an enormous emphasis on his words, he said that what we call the senses in organisms is nothing but degrees of awareness. He maintained that if we accept that the senses are dark sea of awareness, we have to admit that the interpretation that the senses make of sensory data is also dark sea awareness. He explained at length that to face the world around us in the terms that we do is a result of interpretation system of mankind, with which every human being is equipped. He also said that every organism in existence has to have an interpretation system that permits it to function in its surroundings. The sorcerers who came after the apocalyptic upheavals I told you about, he continued, saw that at the moment of death, the dark sea of awareness sucked in, so to speak, through the assemblage point, the awareness of living creatures. They also saw that the dark sea of awareness had a moment's, let's say, hesitation when it was faced with the sorcerers who had done a recounting of their lives. Unbeknownst to them, some had done it so thoroughly that the dark sea of awareness took their awareness in the form of their life experiences, but didn't touch their life force. Sorcerers had found out a gigantic truth about the forces of the universe. The dark sea of awareness wants only your life experiences, not our life force. The premises of Don Juan's elucidation were incomprehensible to me. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that I was vaguely and yet deeply cognized of how functional the premise of his explanation were. Sorcerers believe, Don Juan went on, that we recapitulate our lives. All the debris, as I told you, comes to surface. We realize our inconsistencies, our repetitions, but something in us puts up a tremendous resistance to recapitulating. Sorcerers say that the road is free only after a gigantic upheaval. After the appearance on our screen of the memory on an event that shakes our foundations with its terrifying clarity of detail, it's the event that drags us to the actual moment that we live it. Sorcerers call that event the Usher, because from then on, every event we touch on is relived, not merely remembered. Walking is always something that precipitates memories, Don Juan went on. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico believed that everything we live, we start as a sensation on the backs of the legs. They consider the backs of the legs to be the warehouse of man's personal history. So let's go for a walk in the hills now. We walked until it was almost dark. I think I have made you walk long enough, Don Juan said. When we went back at his house, do you have to ready to begin this sorcerer's maneuver of finding an usher? An event in your life that you will remember with such clarity that it will serve as a spotlight to illuminate everything else in your recapitulation with the same or comparable clarity. Do what sorcerers call recapitulating pieces of a puzzle. Something will lead you to remember the event that will serve as your usher. He left me alone, giving me one last warning. Give it your best shot, he said, do your best. I was extremely silent for a moment, perhaps due to the silence around me. I experienced then a vibration, a sort of jolt in my chest. I had difficulty breathing, but suddenly something opened up in my chest that allowed me to take a deep breath. And a total view of a forgotten event of my childhood burst into my memory, as if it had been captive and suddenly released. I was at my grandfather's studio where I had a billiard table, and I was playing billiards with him. I was almost 9 years old then. My grandfather was quite a skillful player, and compulsively he had taught me every play he knew until I was good enough to have a serious match with him. We spent endless hours playing billiards. I became so proficient at it that one day I defeated him. From that day on, he was incapable of winning. Many a time, I had deliberately threw the game just to be nice to him, but he knew it and would become furious with me. Once he got so upset that he hit me on the top of my head with the cue. To my grandfather's chagrin and delight, by the time I was 9 years old, I can make karam after karam without stopping. He became so frustrated and impatient in a game with me once that he threw down his cue and told me to play by myself. My compulsive nature made it possible for me to compete with myself and work the same play on and on until I got it perfectly. One day, a man notorious in town for his gambling connections, the owner of a billiards house, came to visit my grandfather. They were talking and playing billiards as I happened to enter the room. I insistently tried to retreat, but my grandfather grabbed me and pulled me in. "This is my grandson," he said to the man. "Very pleased to meet you," the man said. He looked at me sternly and then extended his hand, which was the size of the head of a normal person. I was horrified. His enormous burst of laughter told me he was cognizant of my discomfort. He told me that his name was Falelo Koroga. I mumbled my name. He was very tall and extremely well dressed. He was wearing a double-breasted blue pinstripe suit with beautifully tapered trousers. He must have been in his early 50s then, but he was trim and fit except for a slight bulge in his midsection. He wasn't fat. He seemed to cultivate the look of a man who was well fed and not in need of anything. Most of the people in my hometown were gaunt. They were people who labored hard to earn a living and had no time for niceties. Falelo Koroga appeared to be the opposite. His whole demeanor was that of a man who had time for niceties. Okay, I'm going to share something very quickly and very weird that's happening to me in this present moment. I have deja vu about reading this on camera to you guys, as if I already done it already. For real. Like when this story, I believe I've heard this before, maybe. I don't think I have. But holy shit. It's crazy feeling. I had to do some deep breathing. He was pleasant looking. He had a bland, well-shaven face with kind blue eyes. He had the air and the confidence of a doctor. People in my town used to say that he was capable of putting anyone at ease, and that he should have been a priest, a lawyer, or a doctor instead of a gambler. They also used to say that he made more money gambling than all the doctors and lawyers in town, and put together made by working. His hair was black and carefully combed. It was obviously thin and considerably. He tried to hide his receding hairline by combing his hair over his forehead. He had a square jaw, an absolutely winning smile. He had big white teeth, which were cared for, the ultimate novelty in an area where tooth decay was monumental. Two other remarkable features of Allykatkreations for me were his enormous feet and his handmade black patent leather shoes. I was fascinated by the fact that his shoes didn't squeak at all as he walked back and forth in the room. I was accustomed to hearing my grandfather's approach by squeak of the soles of his shoes. My grandson plays billiards very well, my grandfather said nonchalantly to Allykatkreations. Why don't I give him my cue and let him play with you while I watch? This child plays billiards? The big man asked my grandfather with a laugh. Oh, he does, my grandfather assured him. Of course, not as well as you do, Allykatkreations. Why don't you try him? And to make it interesting for you, so you won't be patronizing my grandson, let's bet a little money. What do you say if we bet this much? He put a thick wad of crumpled up bills on the table and smiled at Allykatkreations, shaking his head from side to side as if daring the big man to take the bet. My, oh my, that much, eh? Allykatkreations said, looking at me questioningly. He opened up his wallet, then pulled out some neatly folded bills. This, for me, was another surprising detail. My grandfather's habit was to carry his money in every one of his pockets, all crumpled up. When he needed to pay for something, he had to straighten out the bills in order to count them. Allykatkreations didn't say it, but I knew that he felt like a highway robber. He smiled at my grandfather, and obviously out of respect for him, he put his money on the table. My grandfather, acting as the arbiter, set the game at a certain number of korums and flipped a coin to see who would start first. Allykatkreations won. You better give it your all you have without holding back, my grandfather urged him. Don't have any qualms about demolishing this twerp and winning my money. Allykatkreations, following my grandfather's advice, played as hand as he was able, but at one point he missed one korum by a hair. I took the cue. I thought I was going to faint, but seeing my grandfather's glee, he was jumping up and down, calmed me. And besides, it irked me to see Allykatkreations about to split his sides laughing when he saw the way I held the cue. I couldn't lean over the table as billiards is normally played because of my height, but my grandfather, with painstaking patience and determination, had taught me an alternative way of playing. By extending my arm all the way back, I held the cue nearly above my shoulders to the side. What does he do when he has to reach the middle of the table? Allykatkreations asked, laughing. He hangs on the edge of the table, my grandfather, and matter-of-factly, it's permissible, you know. My grandfather came to me and whispered through clenched teeth that if I tried to be polite and lose, he was going to break all the cues on my head. I asked him, I knew he, I have a cat playing with my wires. I knew he didn't mean it. This was just his way of expressing his confidence in me. Sorry about that again. I won easily. My grandfather was delighted beyond description, but strangely enough, so was Allykatkreations. He laughed as he went around the pool table, slapping the edges. My grandfather praised me to the skies. He revealed to Kreations my best score and joked that I had excelled because he had found the way to lure me to practice coffee with Danish pastries. You don't say, Kreations kept repeating. He said goodbye. My grandfather picked up the bet money and incident was forgotten. My grandfather promised to take me to a restaurant and buy me the best meal in town, but he never did. He was very stingy. He was known to be a lavish spender only with women. 2 days later, two enormous men affiliated with Falelo Karoga came to me at the time that I got out from school and was leaving. Falelo Karoga wants to see you, one of them said in a guttural tone. He wants you to go to his place and have some coffee and Danish pastries with him. If he hadn't seen coffee and Danish pastries, I probably would have run away from them. I remembered that my grandfather had told Falelo Karoga that I would sell my soul for coffee and Danish pastries. I gladly went with him. However, I couldn't walk as fast as they did. So one of them, the one whose name was Guillermo Falcon, picked me up and cradled me in his huge arms. He laughed through crooked teeth. You better enjoy the ride, kid, he said. My breath was terrible. Have you ever been carried by anyone, judging by the way you're wiggling? Never. He giggled grotesquely. Fortunately, Faleo Karoga's place was not too far from the school. Mr. Falcone deposited me on the couch in the office. Falelo Karoga was there, sitting behind a huge desk. He stood up and shook hands with me. He immediately had some coffee and delicious pastries brought to me, and the two of us sat there chatting amiably about my grandfather's chicken farm. He asked me if I would like to have some more pastries, and I said that I wouldn't mind if I did. He laughed, and he himself brought me a whole tray of unbelievably delicious pastries from the next room. After I had veritably gorged myself, he politely asked me if I would consider coming to his billiards place in the wee hours of the night to play a couple of friendly games with some people of his choice. He casually mentioned that a considerable amount of money was going to be involved. He openly expressed his trust in my skill and added that he was going to pay me for my time and effort, a percentage of the winnings money. He further stated that he knew the mentality of my family, that they would have found it improper that he gave me money, even though it was a pay. So he promised to put the money in the bank in a special account for me. Or more practical yet, he would cover any purchase that I made in any of the stores in town, or food I consume in any restaurant in town. I didn't believe a word that he was saying. I knew that Falelo Karoga was a crook, a racketeer. I liked, however, the idea of playing billiards with people I didn't know, and I struck a bargain with him. Will you give me some coffee and Danish pastries like the ones you gave me today? I said. Of course, my boy, he replied, if you come to play for me. I will buy you the bakery. I will have the baker bake them just for you. Take my word. I warned Falelo Karoga that the only drawback was my incapacity to get out of my house. I had too many aunts who watched me like hawks, and besides, my bedroom was on the second floor. That's no problem, Falelo Karoga assured me. You're quite small. Mr. Falcone will catch you if you jump from your window into his arms. He's as big as a house. I recommend that you go to bed early tonight. Mr. Falcone will wake you up by whistling and throwing rocks at your window. You have to watch out, though. He's an impatient man. I went home in the midst of the most astounding excitation. I couldn't go to sleep. I was quite awake when I heard Mr. Falcone whistling and throwing small pebbles against the glass panes of my window. I opened the window. Mr. Falcone was right below me on the street. Jump into my arms, kid, he said to me in a constricted voice, which he tried to modulate into a loud whisper. If you don't aim at my arms, I will drop you and you'll die. Remember that. Don't make me run around. Just aim at my arms. Jump, jump. I did, and he caught me with the ease of someone catching a bag of cotton. He put me down and told me to run. He said that if I was a child awakened from a deep sleep and that he had to make me run, So I would be fully awake by the time I got to the billiards house. I played that night with two men and won both games. I had the most delicious coffee and pastries that one could imagine. Personally, I was in heaven. It was around 7 in the morning when I returned home. Nobody had noticed my absence. It was time to go to school. For all practical purposes, everything was normal except for the fact I was so tired that I couldn't keep my eyes open all day. From that day on, Valelo Quiroga sent Mr. Falcone to pick me up 2 or 3 times a week, and I won every game that he made me play. And faithful to his promise, he paid for everything that I bought, including meals at my favorite Chinese restaurant, where I used to go daily. Sometimes I even invited my friends, whom I mortified to no end by running out of the restaurant screaming when the waiter brought the bill. They were all amazed at the fact that they were never taken to the police for consuming food and not paying for it. What was an ordeal for me that I had never conceived of, the fact that I would have to contend with the hopes and expectations of all the people who bet on me. The ordeal of ordeals, however, took place when a crack player from a nearby city challenged Valelo Quiroga and backed his challenge with a giant bet. The night of the game was an inauspicious night. My grandfather became ill and couldn't fall asleep. The entire family was in an uproar. It appeared that nobody went to bed. I doubted that I had any possibility of sneaking out of my bedroom, but Mr. Falcone's whistling and pebbles hitting the glass of my window were so instant that I took a chance and jumped from my window into Mr. Falcone's arms. It seemed that every male in town had congregated at the billiards place. Anguished faces silently begged me not to lose. Some of the men boldly assured me that they had bet their houses and their belongings. One man, in a half-joking tone, said that he had bet his wife. If I didn't win, he would be a cuckold that night or murderer. He didn't specify whether he meant he would kill his wife in order not to be a cuckold or me for losing the game. Valelo Quiroga paced back and forth. He had hired a masseur to massage me. He wanted me relaxed. The masseur put hot towels on my arms and wrists and cold towels on my forehead. He put on my feet the most comfortable soft shoes that I have ever worn. They had hard military heels and arch supports. Valelo Quiroga even outfitted me with a beret to keep my hair from falling in my face, as well as a pair of loose overalls with a belt. Half of the people around the billiard table were strangers from another town. They glared at me. They gave me the feeling that they wanted me dead. Valelo Quiroga flipped a coin to decide who would go first. My opponent was a Brazilian of Chinese descent, young, round-faced, very spiffy, and confident. He started first, and he made a staggering amount of carums. I knew by the color of his face that Valelo Quiroga was about to have a heart attack, and so were the other people who had bet everything they had on me. I played very well that night, and as I approached the number of carums that the other man had made, the nervousness of the ones who had bet on me reached its peak. Valelo Quiroga was the most hysterical of them all. He yelled at everyone and demanded that someone open the window because the cigarette smoke made the air unbreathable for me. He wanted the masseur to relax my arms and shoulders. Finally, I had to stop everyone, and in a real hurry. I made the 8 carums that I needed to win. The euphoria of those who had bet on me was indescribable. I was oblivious to all of that, for it was already morning and they had to take me home in a hurry. My exhaustion that day knew no limits. Very oblongly, Valelo Quiroga didn't send for me for a whole week. However, after noon, Mr. Falcon picked me up from school and took me to the billiards house. Valelo Quiroga was extremely serious. He didn't even offer me coffee and Danish pastries. He sent everybody out of his office and got directly to the point. He pulled out his chair close to me. I have put a lot of money in the bank for you, he said very solemnly. I am true to what I promised you. I give you my word that I will always look after you. You know that. Now, if you do what I am going to tell you to do, you will make so much more money that you won't have to work a day in your life. I want you to lose your next game by 1 korum. I know that you can do it, but I want you to miss by only a hair. The more dramatic, the better. I was dumbfounded. All of this was incomprehensible to me. Allykaroga repeated his request and further explained that he was going to bet anonymously all he had against me, and that was the nature of our new deal. Mr. Falcone has been guarding you for months, he said. All I need to tell you is that Mr. Falcone uses all his force to protect you, but he could do the opposite with the same strength. Allykaroga's threat couldn't have been more serious. He had must seen my face, the horror that I felt, for relaxed and laughed. Oh, but don't you worry about things like that, he said reassuringly, because we are brothers. This was the first time in my life that I had been placed in an untenable position. I wanted with all my might to run away from Allykaroga, from the fear that he had invoked in me. But at the same time, and with equal force, I wanted to stay. I wanted the ease of being able to buy anything I wanted from the store. And above all, the ease of being able to eat at any restaurant of my choice without paying. I never confronted, however, with having to choose one or the other. Unexpectedly, at least for me, my grandfather moved to another area quite distant. It was as if he knew what was going on, and he sent me ahead of everyone else. I doubted that he actually knew what was taking place. It seemed that sending me away was one of his usual instinctive actions. Don Juan's return brought me out of my recollection. I had lost track of time. I should have been famished, but I wasn't hungry at all. I was filled with nervous energy. Don Juan lit a kerosene lantern and hung it from a nail on the wall. Its dim light cast strange dancing shadows in the room. I took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the semi-darkness. I entered then into a state of profound sadness. It was strangely detached feeling, a far-reaching longing that came from the semi-darkness, or perhaps from the sensation of being trapped. I was so tired that I wanted to leave, but at the same time, and with the same force, I wanted to stay. Don Juan's voice brought me to a measure of control. He appeared to know the reason for the depth of my turmoil and modulated his voice to fit the occasion. The severity of his tone helped me to gain control over something that could easily have turned into a hysterical reaction to fatigue and mental stimulation. To recount events is magical for sorcerers, he said. It isn't just telling stories. It is seeing the underlying fabric of events. This is the reason recounting is so important and vast. At his request, I told Don Juan the event I had recollected. How appropriate, he said and chuckled with delight. The only commentary I made is that the warrior travelers roll with the punches. They go wherever the impulse may take them. The power of warrior travelers is to be alert, to get maximum effect from minimal impulse. And above all, their power lies not in interfering. Events have a force, a gravity of their own, and travelers are just travelers. Everything around them is far from their eyes alone. In this fashion, travelers construct the meaning of every situation without ever asking how it happened in this way or that way. Today you remembered an event that sums up your total life, he continued. You are always faced with the situation that is the same as the one that you never resolved. You never really had to choose whether to accept or reject Allykaroga's crooked deal. Infinity always puts us in terrible position of having to choose, he went on. We want infinity, but at the same time, we want to run away from it. You want to tell me to go and jump in a lake, but at the same time, you're compelled to stay. It would be infinitively easy for you to just be compelled to stay. I'm going to end it there because the next section is lengthy. And that's a lot to take in. So I want to hear in the comments, what did you think about that? And I mean, I went through a deja vu right there. I find what a lot of people are going through right now, and especially with the dark night of the soul, this is very important, that you're healing old trauma. You're recounting and going through events of your life that shape the person who you are today. No matter what age you are, no matter where you've been in your life, you are reshaping your life. You're healing traumas and you're healing situations. And sometimes you don't know it. It comes up out of nowhere. And here you are, dumbfounded why that came up. There's always a reason for it. A lot of people don't analyze objectively their lives. They don't understand why certain things have happened to them. But understanding how to recognize when something is triggering you. If it's a past trauma, how do you move over? How do you move on from it? And how do you react differently to it? If we take things that have hurt us and say, well, what lesson did I learn from that? And how do I not repeat it? And when the cycle repeats, how do I acknowledge that it's repeating? And that's very similar to what's happening. A lot of the times, many of us don't know it, but we have unhealed trauma from childhood. Because of our, because time passes on, and sometimes events are compartmentalized in our heads and we forget about the trauma. An event or a spark unleashes it. And it asks us to learn from it and to grow from it and to acknowledge it so that we can forgive ourselves and the people that were enacting the harm. And how not to be and how not to react. It is a very difficult process when you first wake up. And I've been through so many dark nights of the souls, it's not even a joke. And I'm going through one right now. I'm visiting a period of my life very similar to what I've had almost 9 years ago, where one job almost tried to kill me, and I had a length of time where I was unemployed. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And I went on a journey. And I learned why certain people reacted certain ways. I reflected on it. I saw that even though I was grieving and it was really sad that I had to go, that there was another door opening for me. And I had to be patient and wait. Here we go, second time. Different scenario, but very similar. I am not committing suicide by doing that. I'm not going into anaphylactic shock another time. I already did it 3 times 4, sort of. Each time it gets worse, and each time death is like imminent. And I had to learn this time around how to react, how to relax, let things go with the flow, which I have been. Am I stressed? Yeah, absolutely. My mother was alive the first time. Now she's not alive. I have a few friends that are amazing, that keep me sane. But it's not easy when the bills are due and you have no money. It's not easy when you look at the food and you have to prioritize what you eat for what day. It's not easy when gas is over now $4 a gallon and you're relegated to staying within a mile or 2 of the house, and that your car is about to break down any minute now, and that you're lucky you even have it. So I'm being given worse circumstances thrown at me to see how I react and how I am going to persevere through this. I hope I do. I know I will try and give it my all. But it's a dark night of the soul, because I have to look back at my past and I have to see where I went wrong, my thinking, and bring it back. And look at this situation and go, okay, if I'm repeating this, then what did I learn from the last time and how can I apply it to this? And it could go for anything. But that deja vu is real. Definitely real. Which makes me think that timelines are merging even more, because a lot of people are drawing blanks. A lot of people are having a lot of difficulty energetically wise right now. I mean, not to worry. Binaural beats, guided sleep meditations, very helpful if you feel yourself not being able to get to sleep because your mind's overactive. I have drops for that, for real. Let's see if I can find them. Not those. I found them. Jeez Louise, sorry guys. These literally make me relaxed. These taste amazing. I haven't been whipping these out or showcasing them. But these are awesome. If you need to relax, if you can't get to sleep, this has blends of organic stuff in it that makes it good. If you're interested and you need to chill out like I do, please email and I can give you more information. Things are getting really, really quickened timeline wise, and things are going energetically to get crazier. So I urge everybody who's having really bad nights, and not to say that they're bad, it's just you can't get to sleep and then the rest of your day you're groggy and you're like zombified. I have that quite often because I'm up doing these videos or thinking and reading, and I do my best reading usually at night. These times are to transform us. The earth is going through its own shadow period. She's merging up and she's going to try to take as many of us with her as possible. It's up to us to do the work. He's doing the work. And you could see it's not easy. And it brings up a lot of shit that you don't want to confront and you don't want to face. But once you face that trauma and let it go, and you really heal it, you can cut the cords to it, make amends with it, forgive it, because you signed up for that arrangement. You signed up for that lesson. And it needed to happen for you to grow as a human. And it's okay. Cry it out. Take a bath. Drink. I don't drink anymore. But I was going to say have a glass of wine. I wouldn't drink as much. So if anybody's doing that, it lowers your vibration. We need all the high vibes that we can get. But with working with this, a lot of people are going through this right now. And a lot of people, instead of confronting it, are distracting themselves with the black cube. Let's binge watch and chill. Yeah, you couldn't watch people talk about intelligent things. Not being programmed is number one. Yeah, there are shows that are enjoyable to watch, but limit your time in watching them. I'm not saying, like, I know a lot of people can't get off the TV addiction. I force myself. I love hockey. I love hockey. And I just now look at my updates on my phone to see where my team is at. Because they are last and they have been having trouble and they suck right now. But I still love them. I mean, I was really into the Game of Thrones, which is a lot of good theories, a lot of good pre-programming to tell you what's gonna happen. Dragons and beyond the ice wall with giants, with the giants coming through, with the dragons flying around, and everybody bartering to try to be a king. And it's the three-eyed raven who becomes king. Sorry if you didn't watch that, but it's worth it. Yeah, there's our world as we know it is that freaking show and book series. Yep. With the mixture of Star Wars, Star Trek, X-Files on top of all of that, sure, add those on top. And the Matrix. And I'm saying all of this to say that this is why I chose this book to read now, and I'm like consistently reading it, where I would do a couple of chapters and then like do 4 or 5 books in between and then come back to it. I'm doing this consistently because it is now that we need to understand what we need to do to help us move forward and to heal. You know, like my circumstances, I'm trying what I can to figure it out. But again, unless someone has an exorbitant amount of lotto money that wants to help me sell my house and move me out and not have to lose the lights, the electric, the insurances on everything, it is not easy. People are like, oh, well, you can move. Well, who wants to buy a house in communist New York? I don't think so. Besides Airbnbs, you know, saying things is easier than doing them, right? So when people say that to me, I'm like, okay, but you're going to pay for it? When you have nothing in the bank, because bills keep coming in, You gonna pay for me? You want me to move? You gonna pay for it? Thank you. You know, it's okay though. Until people go through an event in their lives, they have very limited perception of how to handle a situation unless they go through it themselves. A lot of intuitives, a lot of people who are empathic, a lot of clairvoyant people have very difficult and rough lives because you're very aware of reality. And you're challenged more. So the more you go through, the better you have experience to help other people. I went through hell and back with my health, with losing both my parents, dealing with people, my family and friends committing suicide, drug abuse. I've been through it all. And I'm sure a lot of you have very similar stories. There's a reason for it. Instead of letting it take your life over, and that makes excuses for other things, own it, heal it, move on. Give it the love that it deserves. Forgive it, learn from it, and become who you're meant to become. And of course, there's outside external circumstances that are not in your control, but it's how you confront it and how you react to it that matters. If this was the old me in this situation now, if this was me 8 years ago, I would have killed myself by now. Not knowing, not having control, not having a source of food and income, I would have offed myself. This grown up is persevering as best as I can. That's where I'm at. He's choosing to persevere through a lot of pain. And that's why I'm reading this book to all of you, in hopes that you can connect with it and resonate with what's being said. Without kitty cat butt in your face, so I'm sorry about her. Anyway, I'm rambling. I figured that that's very important for you guys to understand and know why I read this book consistently, and that it's very important for now. Morgan is sleeping, thankfully. She still needs little kitty prayers. I want to give everybody love and light. I'm praying for everybody. I'm praying for the world at large, that this shit ends soon. It's theatrical theater. It's a freaking movie, but it's still live action role playing fun that we all have to dig in on. As much as it's a movie, it's still live action. It's happening now. It's not, some stuff is already filmed, yes, but we still have to go through the motions of everything, and we still have to suffer. So, and now my ear is buzzing. Download. I'm sending everybody love and light. I'm here for everybody, so if you need to write me an email, I will eventually see it when I'm up, and I'll respond as soon as I possibly can. If you're going through whatever it is, if I can't solve or help you out, and if it doesn't resonate with you, there's other people that can, and I can probably help you lead to that other person. Okay? Serious. please make sure you hit that like button. Free way to help me. Until next time, guys, have a great evening, morning, afternoon, midday, brunch, wherever you are in the world. We're getting there, guys. I'll be okay. Bye.